Come with me to pastry school in New York City. This is just night 2 of school, so we still have a long way to go. I headed to class, and when I got there, I got all set up. Today, we were starting by making apple crisps, so Chef demoed how he wanted us to prep the apples, and then I got going peeling and slicing them into wedges. Once we had all our apples prepped, we added them to a pan with some butter, sugar, cinnamon, and lemon juice, and we left that on a low heat to let them simmer.
I don't know if that's low or high or what any of this is. Quad measurement?
While those were going, we worked on the crumble topping. Chef was really nice and let me do mine with all almond flour, so it was gluten-free, which was so exciting. Once the apples were ready, we reduced down the liquid, added those to the ramekins, and put them into bake. While they were baking, Chef showed us how to make cornets. This was my first time ever doing this, and it is so much more difficult than it looks. It's essentially a little paper cone. Tonight we were using it to write with chocolate. So you make your cornet and then add melted chocolate to it. This was Chef showing us, and he was so good at it. This was a very difficult process. Just making the cornet alone was not intuitive. I struggled multiple times before I finally ended up with something that would work, and even then it was not perfect. The tip of mine was a little bit too wide. I did the best I could for the first night, and then it was time to enjoy our apple crisp. We added a little bit of ice cream on top, and this was so yummy. Such a fun second day at pastry school. Come with me to pastry school in New York City. I headed to class today for day 3 of school. It was so beautiful out, and when I got there, I got all set up. Today we were starting by making scones. So as a class, we mise en placed all the ingredients we needed, and then we started by combining all of the dry ingredients: flour, cornmeal, baking soda, salt, and some lemon zest, which smelled so good. Then we added in the butter to cut together with the flour, and Chef showed us how to make a little guard so that it wasn't flying absolutely everywhere when we turned the speed up. Once that was going, I combined all of our wet ingredients, and we also had some dried cherries going into these scones. We added in the final steps and brought the dough together. It was looking so good. We scraped it all out so that we could measure the whole thing so that we knew how much each individual scone should be. Then we weighed all of them and shaped them. We put on a little bit of egg wash and some turbinado sugar. These were looking so good, and this is how they looked when they came out of the oven. They looked so beautiful and golden brown. Sadly, I couldn't eat them since I'm gluten-free, so I had a little bit of clotted cream and jam on a spoon, which honestly was delicious. Then it was time to get into cornets for the second day. So Chef showed us an example again, and then it was time for me to make a few. It went a lot better today than last time. Writing in the chocolate is not exactly coming naturally to me. It's definitely still a work in progress, but that's day 3 of pastry school. Come with me to pastry school in New York City. This is day 4, and we're making some cookies and muffins. I headed to class and got all set up. Today we were starting with ginger cookies, so I mise en placed all of our ingredients. These had some candied ginger on top, which I love. Once we were ready to go, we creamed together the sugar and butter and then added in all our other ingredients. The batter smelled so yummy for these. Then we scooped it out. This texture was so satisfying. Topped it with a little bit of ginger, and here's the final cookie. These looked amazing. Then we moved on to our corn muffins. This was a super simple recipe. So we just mise en placed everything, added together the wet and then the dry. This batter was pretty thick because of the cornmeal, but it also smelled so good. Think of cornbread. These we were piping into the muffin tins. So I got this giant piping bag going and then piped those all in, and they were ready to go into the oven. And here's the final product. They were so cute, so golden brown. At the end of the day, we did a few more cornets, and I'm definitely getting better at these, but they're still a work in progress. Then I got to enjoy a little bit of ice cream with candied ginger, and it was so yummy. Come with me to pastry school in New York City. This is day 5, and we're making pâte à fouille. Chef started with a full demo. He was making lychee pâte à fouille. These are soft French jellies that are usually covered in a little bit of sugar. Then we got going on our own. I was making apricot, so I got my sugar and pectin ready and put this on to boil. It was kind of crazy, but you had to watch this really closely because exactly at 223 degrees, you have to pour this out. So as I was measuring my other ingredients, I was keeping an eye on it, and then suddenly it hit 223 so quickly. So I had to run over and pour it out. I was kind of stressed out. Here's my partner filming me, so you can see me in my moment of panic. But other than a few bubbles, it looked really good, and we left this to set up, and we moved on to some blueberry muffins. We were making these specifically to test how different leaveners affect a baking recipe. So everyone had the same recipe except for slightly different levels of baking soda and baking powder. So we got this all ready, put it in our piping bag and piped it out. This is them in the oven. You can see they're all looking different because of those leaveners. At this point, our pâte à fouille was ready to come out of the mold. So we covered it in some sugar, flipped it over, and then covered the other side in sugar as well. This texture was looking so good. I've never really made anything jelly like this, so it was just fun to see the texture and see how it all came together. Look at that. It looked perfect. We cut them all the exact same way and then got some sugar on the outside and gave them a taste. These were so good, but they were so sugary. It was overwhelming. Everyone had made different flavors, so I got to make a whole little tray, and then at the end of the class, we went over the blueberry muffins and got a whole lesson on how leaveners affect the rise and the texture and all of that. And overall, it was a super successful 5th day. Come with me to Pastry School in New York City. This is day 6 and we're making caramel and candied orange rinds. I headed to class and we got started with the orange rinds because these take a really long time to cook. Chef showed us how he wanted us to prep the rinds, and then I got going cutting up all of our pieces. We put these in with some water and we brought this to a boil 5 separate times to get all of the bitterness out of the rind. Then we added them together with some sugar, let this boil and then come to a simmer, and these had to sit the entire class. After that was done, we moved on to our caramel. Chef did a full demo, so he began by heating up his heavy cream mixture and then moved on to the sugar. This is a dry caramel, so you just add your sugar into a hot pan and let it start to melt and brown. This was so interesting to watch. The second it starts to smoke just a little bit, you mix everything together, and Chef added his sugar in a few rounds and let it get a really nice, rich, dark color. You want to let this smoke a bit because that's what adds the depth of flavor. Then you add in your heavy cream and it starts to boil like crazy. This was so much fun to watch. This is something that needs to hit a very specific temperature. So the second it gets to 245 degrees, you have to pour it out. I mean, just look at how good that looks. Then it was time to move on to our own, so I added in my heavy cream, glucose syrup, vanilla, and got that all heated up. Once we put in our sugar, we had to watch this really carefully to make sure that it didn't burn, but that it got brown enough. So this is the point where it started to smoke a bit, and so we added in our heavy cream. This steam was crazy, but again, I loved watching these bubbles. We got it all mixed together and then tracked it to see exactly when it hit 245 degrees before pouring it out. This has to set up overnight. I'm so sad because I cannot wait to taste this. Next, we were preparing some apple chips. So we used the deli slicer to get really thin cuts, and then we mixed these with some simple syrup and laid them out on a sheet pan to dehydrate in the oven overnight. We had a little bit more time at the end of the day, so Chef showed us some different fruit preparations and knife skills, how to properly cut them so they look attractive. We didn't have a ton of time, so I just made some blood orange supremes and a few plum wedges. Then we checked on our orange rinds, which need a little more time, so we're gonna pick those up tomorrow and finish our caramel, come back to see how those turn out. Come with me to Pastry School in New York City. This is day 7 and it's a full day. We're making tarte tatin, poached pears, panakotta, and more. I headed to class and we first got going on the poached pears because these take a long time to cook in the oven. This is a really simple recipe. We prepped our pears and then put them into a pan with maple syrup, lemon zest, and butter, covered it, and then put it into the oven for about an hour and a half. After those were in the oven, we moved on to our apple tarte tatin. I was so excited for this. We prepped all of our apples into little wedges. Then Chef did a demo on how to prepare our dry caramel for the apples. This was a little bit different than the one we did yesterday. So then we got going on ours. I still love this bubbling. It's also crazy because it really does start to smell burnt. And if I had been baking at home, I probably would have thought that it was too burnt, but that's actually what you want to really get some rich, deep flavor in your caramel. Once the apples had softened, we took them out and then we moved on to the wet caramel for the base of the pans. Chef did a demo for this as well. You add some water and sugar and then really watch it closely until it starts to brown. So you want to let it smoke for a few seconds and then take it off the heat and pour it into the tarte tatin cups. We were making little individual ones. We added in all the apples and then put a little bit of puff pastry on top. Then it was our turn to make our wet caramel. This I honestly thought had gotten too browned, but we tasted it and it wasn't that bitter, so we went for it. Look at that beautiful, rich color. We poured this into the base of our pans and then added all of our apple wedges. These get flipped out and the bottom turns into the top. These went into the oven. Then we took our poached pears out and these were looking so good. I'm so excited to try these. During the class, we also had our orange rinds going the entire time from yesterday. So once those were ready, we took them out and laid them out on a sheet pan and we're gonna coat them with sugar tomorrow. Then we moved on to our panakotta. This was seriously a full day. We were making vanilla panakotta. This is the gelatin going into some milk to bloom. This looked so crazy. I could not believe it. We had some heavy cream going on the side with our vanilla and sugar, added our gelatin, strained it out, and then poured it into these little shot glasses. This also has to set up overnight, so tomorrow we'll come back and add a little bit of gelée to the top. At the end of the day, I flipped over my tarte tatin and I was so excited with how it turned out. We topped it with a little bit of vanilla ice cream and our apple chips from yesterday, and look at how cute this is. I'm obsessed. Come with me to Pastry School in New York City. This is day 8 and we're making homemade marshmallows. I was so excited for this. I've never made marshmallows before. Chef started with a demo where he bloomed his gelatin and then added calamansi juice and sugar to a pot and got that boiling. You add it all together and then put it in a stand mixer to whip in a bunch of air as it cools down. Watching this marshmallow pour out onto the pan was so satisfying. We put this aside to set up and then moved on to our own. I was making blood orange and I loved this color. Also, the gelatin is crazy. Once we got our sugar and juice going, we brought that to 235 degrees and then quickly poured it into our gelatin mixture. Then we got it whipping, and I honestly wish we had let this go for a little bit longer. It felt like it was cooling down, but I feel like it could have gotten a little bit more air inside. But even without that, it was looking so stunning. I loved the little vanilla specks in this. We put it aside to set up and then moved on to some gelée for our panakotta from the day before. For this, we were using gelatin sheets. So we hydrated those and then added them to some mandarin juice and sugar. We let this cool down for a while at room temperature before pouring it on top of all of our cute little panakotta. And then we put this in the refrigerator to let that set up. At this point, it was time to move back to our marshmallows, and I was so excited for this. Chef demoed with his how to cut them, and we also had a cornstarch and sugar mixture to toss them all in. We moved back to ours, and look how pretty and pink this was. I cut them all up into equal pieces, then we tossed them in the cornstarch and sugar, and these were so good. The texture of homemade marshmallows is just so soft in a way that store-bought ones aren't, so I would highly recommend trying these out. At the end of the class, we also made a quick whipped creme fraiche and got out our poached pears and did a little bit of a plating exercise, and these turned out so pretty. This is such an easy dessert if you love a pear or a fruit dessert. Then we also got to try our panakotta, which were delicious, and it was such a successful 8th day. Come with me to Pastry School in New York City. This is day 9 and we're making lollipops, cashew brittle, and more. This was a very full day. I headed to class and immediately Chef got started on a demo for the cashew brittle. I love watching caramel bubble. This is like my new hyperfixation. We added baking powder to this one to get a little bit more fluff in there and then added in all of the cashews. Watching this pour out was so satisfying. Chef rolled it out so that it was nice and thin, and then we moved on to our own. This was a wet caramel and it took a while to get to the point that we wanted it to, so I got to watch lots and lots of bubbling action. Once this started to smoke, we added everything in and then quickly poured it out. We also rolled this out and then left it to sit. After the brittle, we moved on to our lollipops. I was super excited for this. We prepared our little silicone mats, and then I went to the hydroponic garden to grab a few little flower petals. These looked adorable. I got them in my mat, and then I watched the sugar because it had to come to exactly 300 degrees, and then we poured it out. It was so bubbly when I was trying to pour it. It was really difficult. It had calmed down some by this point, but we also had vanilla in it, which looked so pretty. This set up right away, so we were able to take them out, and look how cute these were. Then we moved on to making nougatine for our croquembouche, which is coming at the end of the module, so that's going to be like a while from now. But for this, we just made a dry caramel and mixed in a bunch of sliced almonds, then added it to a sheet and rolled it out flat. Then we took a ring and hammered as hard as we could to cut into this nougatine to make our little discs that are going to be used to build our croquembouche. At the end of the day, we made some New Orleans pralines. I have never made these before, and they're essentially just sugar and pecans. We scooped those out and let them set up. Then it was time to break our brittle. This was a little bit hard to do, but I was really getting into it. It tasted absolutely delicious, and overall, such a successful day. Come with me to pastry school in New York City. This is day 10 and we're making fudge, torrone, saltwater taffy, and more. I headed to class for another busy sugar confections day. Chef was starting with a demo of the torrone. This is essentially a hot sugar and honey caramel that's added to whipping egg whites or meringue. For this recipe, you add in a bunch of different things like nuts and cranberries, really whatever you want, and this mixture is so sticky, but Chef flattened it out and let it set up, and then we moved on to our own. I got some nice sugar bubbling action in, and then it was time to pour it in very slowly to incorporate it with the egg whites. I've never done this method at home, so it was really fun to watch. And then it was time to mix them around. This was so tough and sticky, but we poured it out onto some edible paper, flattened it out the best we could, and then let it sit. And we moved on to our honey roasted peanut brittle. This is very similar to the cashew brittle that we made the day before. So we got our caramel going, added in the nuts, and then poured that out and set it aside. After that, it was time for our walnut fudge, and I was so excited for this. I'm actually going to post a longer video completely about this process because there's a lot to go into, but it was so fun to watch Chef make this and then to make it ourselves, and this fudge is incredible. I'm telling you, it's life-changing. At the very end of the day, we moved on to some saltwater taffy. We heated it up and then poured it out onto the marble slab, and similar to the fudge, Chef showed us how to mix it around to cool it down and incorporate air. And then once you can handle it, you take it into your hands and you do stretches and folds until it gets to the right texture to cut it up. You've probably seen videos of candy shops doing this on a hook. This process took a long time. I handed this over to my partner because it was time to cut up our brittle and our fudge, and then at the very end of the day, our saltwater taffy was ready and we put it in some wrappers, and it was such a fun day. Come with me to pastry school in New York City. This is day 11 and we're making Italian meringue buttercream. This was thankfully a relaxed day after some very, very busy ones. We started by whipping egg whites to see the various stages as they whip. We were making Italian meringue today. There's also French and Swiss meringue, but with Italian, you heat sugar to 240 degrees and then slowly add it into your whipping egg whites. To make it a buttercream, you add butter, and watching this whole thing come together was so fun. I've never made Italian or Swiss meringue. They're kind of one of those things that's a little bit intimidating when you're a home chef. So making this at school was so much fun. Once this had come together, we were also doing some piping practice. So we were learning stars, rosettes, shells. I've never really done a lot of piping. Everything I've ever done was just kind of random squiggles. So trying to do the actual techniques was definitely a little bit challenging, but overall, for my first try, I felt pretty good about how this went. And then at the end of the day, we cut up our torrone from the day before. And this actually blew my mind with how much I loved this. I don't think I've ever had it before. Definitely go get yourself some torrone. Come with me to pastry school in New York City. This is day 12 and it's all about chocolate. I was very excited for this class because I have tried to work with chocolate before, and it might seem easy to just melt it in the microwave, but it's actually a very intricate process to correctly temper the chocolate, which means that you melt it and then cool it to very specific temperatures so that it's in a stable form. So Chef started with a demo. He melted his chocolate to about 40 to 50 degrees Celsius. Then you pour it out, and Chef showed us how to correctly mix it around to bring it down to about 28 or 30 degrees Celsius. Once the chocolate was at the right temp, Chef made a cornet, and for today we were making cute little discs that we decorated with candied oranges and all different things. After Chef's demo, it was our turn to try it. This was a very intimidating process, but we started by melting our chocolate, then poured out 3/4 of the chocolate and mixed that around. This was reminding me of the fudge class. It was definitely an interesting skill to figure out, but it worked pretty well, and once we'd gotten it to the right temp, we filled our cornets and got going. And as the chocolate was setting, ours looked perfectly tempered, which was so exciting. Then we moved on to round 2 of the chocolate, so we did the same process again, and this time we were dipping in our candied orange rind. These set right away, so I got to taste it, and it was incredible. This is definitely one of my new favorite treats. Then we went back into chocolate writing, so this is something that we did way back in those first few days of class, and I wouldn't say I've improved much, but I'm still figuring it out. For one of our tests, we are gonna have to do some chocolate writing, so I definitely need to be practicing this. At the very end of the day, Chef used some of our leftover chocolate to make a big chocolate bark with some caramel white chocolate as well, and this was so good. Overall, such a fun day. Come with me for a field trip at Pastry School in New York City. This was such a fun day. We headed out into the city to check out all these different bakeries. We started off at Ladurée, which is known for their macarons. I'm a huge fan of French macarons since they're naturally gluten-free. We got to check out all the flavors and then pick one for ourselves before heading over to Dominique Ansel Bakery. They are, of course, known for their cronut, which sadly was sold out since we're a night class. We were going to these bakeries at like 7 p.m. And then we moved on to Maribel. This was actually my first time here, and it's this adorable chocolate shop. They have the most beautiful chocolates, which would make amazing gifts. I loved their New York ones. The space is also so cute. They have a little cafe in the back, and we all got to choose a chocolate. I got the passion fruit chocolate, and it was delicious. Then we headed over to Stick With Me, which makes caramels and bonbons. These bonbons were so beautiful. I got the pistachio and the coffee caramel. Then it was time to hit the road again. We passed by Rice to Riches and I really wanted to go in, but sadly it was not a part of our trip this day. We headed up to Salsway, which I was so excited about, but sadly it was already sold out. So we moved on to Bread's Bakery. This was really all gluten, but we got to check out the rugula and the babka, and we all got a little croissant to take home. Then we headed back out. Of course, this was the most disgusting rainy cold day, but we went to Supermoon Bakehouse, which was a really cool vibe. Everything was pretty much sold out, again, because at this point it was like 8:30 or 9. So we went back out, umbrellas up, and we went over to Sweet Rehab, which was a really cool concept. They had the most beautiful millefeuille and eclairs. I finally ate my caramel from Stick With Me. And then we ended the day at Italy. This was really just so we could divide up all of our little baked goods that we'd gotten earlier. This was my raspberry macaron, delicious as always, and I finally ate my pistachio bonbon, which was so good, and overall it was such a fun day. Come with me to Pastry School in New York City. This is day 15 and we're making souffle. I was thrilled for this because souffle is such an intimidating dessert, but it's honestly not that complicated to make. Chef started with his demo, first how to prepare all of the ramekins, and then we got started on the chocolate souffle, which is actually going to be our first practical exam. Chef started by making a flour and butter paste and then adding that to boiling milk before adding in the chocolate and getting it all mixed together. That goes to cool while you work on your meringue. Then add in egg yolks and slowly fold in the meringue. You want to be really careful not to deflate too much of it, or else your souffles won't get that really high rise that you want. After that, Chef added it into his piping bag and then piped it into all the little ramekins and put these into bake, and we went on to our own. So on the side, we have our flour and butter mix, which you add into the milk. Then you add in all your chocolate. We spread this around to cool it down and then got going on our meringue. Then Chef had pulled his souffles out of the oven, and look at how good these looked. I love seeing the rise on these, even though it deflates so quickly, but they looked stunning. Once our meringue was ready, we added in our egg yolks and then slowly folded in all of the egg whites. You do this in a few rounds. The first one pretty much is a sacrifice round, and then the other ones get folded in and they keep their nice light airiness. We put these in the oven and look at how good they turned out. Really praying that my practical goes as well. We did some powdered sugar on top and then moved on to our second souffle of the day. Chef actually let me use gluten-free flour for this, which was so exciting. This was a coconut souffle and we had to make a pastry cream. So here I was tempering our egg mix and then we added it all back to a boil. This used coconut milk and fresh coconut, so it was a little bit of a thicker base. But once our pastry cream had cooled, we added in all of our egg whites and slowly folded them in. We were a little bit worried about this one since it seemed quite thick, but we added it into the piping bag, piped it into all of our prepared ramekins, and this came out so beautifully. I was really excited to see that it had the same amount of rise with the gluten-free flour. Of course, I went to eat one and it was still raw on the inside, so thankfully I was able to throw it back in, and they came out even higher and they were fully cooked through, so delicious. Come with me to Pastry School in New York City. This is day 16 and we're making all the custards, creme brulee, caramel custard, and bread pudding. As a kid with celiac, I have had so much creme brulee. It was pretty much the only guaranteed thing to be gluten-free at a restaurant, so making it was actually so much fun. It's honestly not that difficult. You start by heating up some heavy cream, then add it in together with your egg yolks, and that's your custard base. This goes into the ramekins with a little water bath and then into the oven. Then we moved on to the caramel custards. So chef demoed a dry caramel. This goes in the base of the little cups, and then you make your custard mix, which is half and half and eggs. This gets poured on top of the caramel, and then those go into bake. After chef had done his demo, we moved on to ours. It was honestly fun getting back into caramel, but for this you need to dilute it, so you add in a little bit of water and it just goes crazy, bubbling all over. So that was a little bit of a scary moment, but we got that poured into our tins. Once we had our caramel mix ready, we added that into another container to pour it into all of our little tins, and we got those ready to go and put them into the oven. Then we moved on to our bread pudding. So for this, we were using some brioche and soaking that in our custard mix that we had used for the caramel custards. And I have to be honest with you guys, we ended up finding bugs in these. I can't even get into it. We think they were in the pecans, but I can't make this without just being honest. So you won't see the final bread pudding since, yeah, unfortunately it had bugs. But anyway, after they had baked, our creme brulee and our caramel custards were ready to take out. These actually have to set up overnight, so come back tomorrow to see how they turn out. Come with me to Pastry School in New York City. This is day 17 and it's custards part 2, and we're making cheesecake. This was a great day. Chef actually let me make the cheesecake with a gluten-free crust. So I got to use some rice crackers, which I put through the food processor with some sugar, and then I worked on a little paper cartouche for the bottom of the pans, added in my gluten-free graham cracker crust, and then we got going mixing together the filling. This smelled delicious. I love the smell of cream cheese. Then poured it into our pans and put it into the oven. Next, chef did a demo on creme anglaise, which is like a vanilla custard sauce that we're gonna have to make for our practical exam. He showed us the risk of scrambling it, and then we got working on ours. For this, you add half and half to a pot, bring it to a boil, and then add it into your egg yolks, then add it back all. And sadly, my pot was too hot because I didn't turn the heat off, so mine did get a little bit scrambled, but the portion I was able to save actually turned out pretty well. After that, we moved back to our creme brulee from the day before. Chef showed us how to use the torch gun, although that didn't go too well for me, and how to get the perfect little brulee top. Then he flipped one of our creme custards so we could see the beautiful little caramel top. This looked amazing on the inside. And finally, he showed us how to flip out our cheesecake. Usually at home, you probably use a springform pan, but in bakeries, they don't really have those. So we had to flip this out and do a little bit of magic with it. And then it was time for us to brulee. So I got my torch gun going, gave this a nice little coating. This was so delicious. I kind of am sick of creme brulee, but this actually got me back on it. I also took out my creme custard. It looked so cute. I'm not as much a fan of this, but it was still fun to make and try. And next up was the star of the show, the cheesecake. I was so excited to see how this turned out. We gave it a little bit of a torching so it would come off the pan, and then went along the side. And look at how good this looked. I flipped mine over. The rice cracker crust was definitely a little bit interesting, but it was so delicious, so beautiful and creamy. A great day. Come with me to Pastry School in New York City. This is day 18 and it's the intro to frozen desserts. So we're making ice cream, sorbet, and so much more this week. Today we are starting out with a granite. This is essentially just flavored shaved ice. We were making an Earl Grey flavor, so we got our whole base going, steeped our tea, and strained this entire mixture into a pan to go into the blast chiller to set up. After the granite, we moved on to a sorbet base. We were making chocolate sorbet, which is my favorite. We got everything heated up, put it through the immersion blender, and then put it into the fridge to rest until tomorrow. I checked on our granite quickly and then moved on to a pineapple coconut creme anglaise. For this, we heated up some half and half in coconut milk, then tempered it into some egg yolks and added it back into the pan. You have to bring this up just to the point where the egg yolks have cooked through for eating, but they're not actually coagulated. So this is a little bit of a tricky process, but thankfully it went well. Once our creme anglaise was resting, we turned our attention to little tiny meringue cookies. These were adorable little buttons that we were adding to the top of our desserts later in the week. So we made a stiff peaked French meringue, added in some powdered sugar, whisked that all together, and then piped out the adorable little tiny cookies and put those into the oven. Then I checked on the granite again and used my fork just to get it all mixed up. And at the end of the day, chef did a demo on some candied pistachios. So for this, he made a little bit of a caramel, added in the pistachios, added in some butter, brought everything to a good, nice brown caramel color. But come back tomorrow to see our final sorbet, granite, and ice cream. It's going to be such a fun week. Come with me to Pastry School in New York City. This is day 19 and it's part 2 of frozen desserts. We started with 2 different ice cream flavors. My team was making a basic vanilla and then also a pistachio. For this, you add together all your ingredients and bring them up to 185 degrees, then pour them out, bring them together with an immersion blender, and then let them cool. I was so excited to be making the pistachio flavor because that is always what I get at ice cream shops. I love it. We set our ice cream bases aside to chill and then moved back to our sorbets from the day before. So we got out our chocolate base and added it into the ice cream machine. This cools it down as it churns. We wanted it to get to about -5 degrees. And when this comes out, it looks so good. We threw it in the blast chiller for a few minutes and then it was ready to go. While the rest of the class was using the ice cream machine, we moved on to some of our other projects for the day. So first we made some pizzelle cookies in this adorable little press. We also made some tuile cookies. So we had the batter, flatten them out in the mold, and then put these into the oven to bake. Then it was our turn to make our vanilla ice cream. So we added this into the machine, let it do its magic, and it came out looking so good. We actually had 3 vanilla ice creams for the day with varying fat levels so that we could see the difference. We took all of our cookies out of the oven, and then it was time for the pistachio, the star of the day. We got this into the ice cream machine. When it came out, it was looking absolutely delicious. I seriously could not wait to eat this. Sadly, class ran a little bit long, so I'm gonna have to wait for tomorrow for the ice cream, but we did lay out all our granite and sorbets, and we got to go around and taste every single flavor. Everything was delicious. I think my favorite was the chocolate and the blackberry sorbet. I packed some up to take home, and it was such a fun day. Come back tomorrow to see how the ice cream turns out. Come with me to Pastry School in New York City. This is day 20, and it's the final day of frozen desserts. We started by making a souffle glace, which I'd never really heard of before, but it's essentially just an airy, light ice cream. So for this, we were making a pâte bombe, which is similar to Italian meringue, where you add hot sugar into whipping eggs, but for this, it's yolks instead of whites. So once we had this mix cooled down, we added in some whipped egg whites to add even more air and fluffiness to this. This mixture was looking so good. It honestly reminded me of like peep marshmallows or something. We piped this into the molds and then put it into the blast chiller to set up. Then chef moved on to a demo for pastry cream, which we're going to be using next week. So for this, you heat up some milk and then add it into some egg yolks, put it all back onto the stove until it gets really thick. Then you add it together with some butter and vanilla and whip that until it's all done. So then we got going, adding our egg yolks to cornstarch, tempering them with our milk, and then whisking until it got super thick. This was really difficult. You can see I was giving it everything I had. Then we added it in together with our butter and vanilla and set that aside to cool down. And now it was time to move back to our ice cream from the day before. So this was the most exciting moment. We laid out everything we had made and then got going on some plating. I added some meringues and then tried to make a quenelle, but it didn't really work. I added on some raspberry sauce and candied pistachios, and this was so good. All of my favorite flavors. I also got to try the souffle glace at the end of the day, which was delicious, and I packed up as much as I could take home. Such a fun week. Come with me for my first practical exam at Pastry School in New York City. Today we had to make a chocolate souffle and serve it with a crème anglaise, which is like a vanilla sauce. So first we got started on our crème anglaise. I had to prep all of the ingredients and show them to chef as my little mise en place. Then you get going first by heating up some half and half and vanilla, and then on the side you have your egg yolks and sugar. Once the half and half starts to boil, you slowly pour it into the egg yolks, which is called tempering. After you've tempered about half of the milk into the egg yolks, you add it all back onto the stovetop. So you have to check the temperature very closely. Chef was looking over my shoulder during this process, which was so scary. But once it hit 180 degrees, you have to take it off super quick and then pour it out and set it aside to cool. Then I moved on to my souffle. So I started by preparing all of my ramekins with some butter and sugar and then got going mise en placing all of the ingredients. For the souffle, you heat up your milk and then add in a butter and flour paste until it gets nice and thick. Then take that off the heat and add in the sugar, get that entire mixture all combined, and then set it aside to cool. Then you move on to your meringue. So I started by whipping all of my egg whites and then slowly adding in sugar. And for this, we want it to be at medium peak. So this was also a little bit of a scary process to make sure I got my meringue perfectly whipped. Once the chocolate mixture is cooled, you add in your egg yolks and then slowly fold in the meringue in 3 separate additions. This is another scary part because you don't want to deflate the meringue too much as you mix it in. So I was trying to be super careful as I was folding it in, and again, chef was looking over my shoulder the entire time. Then I added it into my piping bag and put it into all of my ramekins. I was a little nervous because it didn't fill the last one, so I was wondering why my batter wasn't enough, and that was Chef asking me. While my souffles were in the oven, I poured out my creme anglaise and they were looking so good. I was actually the first one to go, so I was feeling really scared. But I brought my souffle out and it was looking so good, evenly risen, super high up. I pulled the top off one and it was actually still raw on the inside, so I decided to put it back in the oven for another 30 seconds to 1 minute. And when I took them out the second time, they looked even better, checked the inside, and it was all cooked. So I picked the best one, topped it with some powdered sugar, and then plated it up with my creme anglaise. And there we go. It was a very successful first practical exam. Come with me to Pastry School in New York City. This is day 22 and we're learning all about pâte choux and pastry cream. I've always wondered how to make choux pastry, so I was super excited for this. Chef started with a demo after we had mise en place all of our ingredients. So you begin by heating up your milk, butter, sugar, and then add in the flour. And then you have to mix this really well while it's on the heat. Then you add it to a stand mixer and add in your eggs. And once this gets to a nice consistency with a ribbon, you start to pipe it out. So Chef showed us how to pipe out all the different shapes. We were starting with some cream puffs, and then also we did some eclair and some Paris Brest. These cream puffs are being used for a croquembouche in the next class, which is going to be so thrilling to make. He topped it with a little bit of almonds and then a little bit of powdered sugar, and we put those into bake and moved on to ours. Same as Chef, we started by heating up our milk and then adding in the flour. And I feel like this is the part that really can make or break it if you take it off the heat at the right time. So we were calling over Chef to check ours out. He gave us the approval, and then we added it to the stand mixer. And you need to add in your eggs roughly one at a time, but I missed a few and they went in two at a time, but that's fine. Once the batter had come together, we added it into our piping bag and then got going. Chef made this look a lot easier than it is. I was having a lot of difficulty piping these little cream puffs at first, but then I got in a flow, and we needed about 30 of these each for our croquembouche. We also did a few of the eclairs and the Paris Brest and then put these into bake. And we grabbed our pastry cream that we had made the class before. Now was the time to add any of the flavors we wanted, so we were going to do a chocolate. We added in some melted chocolate and then put it over a double boiler to bring it all together. Then our pâte choux had come out of the oven. They looked so cute.
Wow.
We're not filling these until next class, so we wrapped them all up, put them aside, and come back next time to see how they turn out. Come with me to Pastry School in New York City. This is day 22 and it's part 2 of pâte choux, and we're making a croquembouche, so it might be the best day ever. We started with our pastry cream. We were making a slightly lighter version by whipping in some heavy cream, and then we also got the chocolate nice and softened up so that we could get ready to pipe these into our choux pastry from the day before. Then Chef did a demo on how to fill all of the pâte choux. He also showed us if you cut it in half, you can pipe it on the inside, and then we also tried topping it with some fondant and some chocolate glaze and sprinkles. Of course, Chef's looked so pretty. Ours were a little bit more interesting, but I made one eclair starting by taking my paring knife and making some holes in the middle, then piping in my pastry cream filling and dipping this in some chocolate glaze. I thought it turned out pretty well. I actually dropped it a few times, but it looked super cute. Then we moved on to the croquembouche. Chef started with a demo, so he made a very light caramel and then dipped all of his little cream puffs in. And there's 2 different ways that you can set these. You can either put them down flat or put them into one of these round molds. So we got to see the difference between the two, and I really liked how pretty and shiny the round mold ones turned out. Then Chef got going building his croquembouche, so this is definitely a lot more challenging than it looks. You have to use your sugar as glue and then build these all up with a little bit of an angle so that they turn into this adorable little tower. It was super fun watching Chef build this. He also used some forks at the end to get some sugar strings all over. And then we moved on to ours. So I got going making the caramel and then slowly started to dip in my cream puffs. This is a little bit of a scary process because this sugar is so hot. If you touch yourself, you will burn so badly. But I got all my cute little cream puffs with their sugar and then started building my tower. I really wanted this to turn out well, so I was stacking all of them in equal sizes and figuring out how many I was going to put on each row before I went, also trying not to burn myself the entire time. But slowly it started to come together, one level at a time. It was looking pretty good. I was feeling good about this. Then I put on the final touch and then got some forks to do a little bit of the sugar strings all around. This was looking so cute, and here is my final croquembouche. I was super proud of this and it was such a fun day.